Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. I'm really excited for this episode of the Rosenblog for June 2024. We're going to start off with a bit of news, and then go into a review of Tangram City. So first, the biggest piece of news in the last month regarding Rosenberg games is the fact that Rosenberg is developing a game with Germany's Federal Ministry of Education and Research, with the theme of this new game being focused on research laboratories and quantum technology. This is in collaboration with some folks from the Technical University of Braunschweig, and is slated to be done probably within the next few years. The article, which I will link below, slated it being more widely available in 2027, with early playtesting starting next year, 2025. So I don't know if in between those times is when a full version of the game will be widely available or limited to, people who sign up to play the game or something. And I guess it kind of peeks into how long the process is to create a board game, to playtest it, and to make it just right, in the sense of games that are not produced on Kickstarter or have implementations on Board Game Arena, for example, which allow for some playtesting by the masses instead of a focused group. Now, this is an interesting project to me. One, thematically, this is outside of what Rosenberg has done in the past and may be familiar with, and so it'll be interesting to see what he pulls off. The focus of this game is meant to be fun and educational according to the article, so my guess is that it will land closer to something more lightweight to medium weight, such as Adiwa, which can also be seen as another educational type game. And I think the theme of this game can lend itself to classic Rosenberg mechanisms, though. For example, I could see this game having worker placement, resource management be a feature or features of this game, due to the theme being more perhaps running a research laboratory instead of something a little bit more thematic to science, such as games like Genotype, where you are kind of exploring the science behind some of the topics that we discuss in biology and physics and whatnot, and utilizing board game mechanisms to do so. So I think this game might model, hopefully is my guess, it'll model games like Weather Machine or even Unconscious Mind, two of the games that came to mind where the topic of research or study or I guess science or medicine is more developed in the sense that is more big picture in scope. More management and simulation of managing a research laboratory rather than performing the research on the bench, hands-on. And so that's my guess of what is going to happen. They have received a lot of money to be able to produce this game. There's a lot of collaboration as well to make sure that the science behind this game is sound. And so I'm really excited, though, because of the pedigree of Rosenberg and games that are both mechanically sound as well as educationally and thematically functional as well, such as Adiwa, with the concept of training bats, and the way that you gain resources in that game is very functional yet thematic in nature. And more on that if you go and check my back catalog of podcasts on Adiwa. And so there you go. So really excited to see where this game goes. And since this launch may not take until, a few years in the future, hopefully this won't hinder any other games that are coming down the line closer to our time frame now, such as more games in the Adiwa trilogy and otherwise. I'm excited for Black Forest this year, and supposedly in other news, the Danes, which is a standalone sequel to A Feast for Odin, is slated to come out next year. There was some talk on Board Game Geek in the forums about how production and illustrations have been nearly set for this game, but it did not quite make the quota or the time frame to be released this year. So we definitely have Black Forest coming down the line, and hopefully within the last half of 2025, perhaps at Essen, is when we will see the Danes. This is going to be a standalone sequel to A Feast for Odin. It's confirmed to not be separated, similar to how Agricola 15 was released, where you had the full box with all of the base game and expansions included, versus just the box, right? Two different products at the same release was done for Agricola 15. That will not be the case for the Danes, where it will be a standalone game for all to purchase. And so for those who have A Feast for Odin already, perhaps there will be some duplicate components made in this box that you won't be able to use, but in any case, it is really exciting for some additional content for the highest rated Rosenberg game on BoardGameGeek to come out in the near future. Also perusing the forums for Newsphere, the big box edition, highly anticipated. I'm hoping to see that very soon. I thought it would be released around this time this year, but unfortunately production has been postponed and will most likely be ready in the first quarter to first half of next year. So we have that to hopefully look forward to as well. Anything more concrete I will mention in the podcast. So let's finally get into the review of Tangram City. This review is highly anticipated for me. I did purchase a copy after learning that a local board game store had some advanced copies of the game. I'm pretty sure that this game is now orderable from Capstone Games if you are in the States, and via other companies otherwise in other countries. But Tangram City is a lightweight tile placement game that has players putting down Tangram-style pieces on personal boards over 6 rounds, and whoever has the most points wins. If you aren't familiar with the Tangram style of a puzzle, these Tangram pieces have a lot of diagonal shapes to them. They're irregularly shaped, they're not squared off, such as a domino or a polyomino. And so the gimmick, if you will call it that, of this game is the way that these pieces are functionally made and how they fit together. But anyway, similar to games, and let's go over some game highlights here. Similar to games like Kingdom Builder and My City, a deck of shuffled cards is shuffled, and then you reveal cards from that deck, and it tells everyone to place a certain tile, which everyone has a single copy of or a couple of copies of each type of tile that is represented in this deck, and they place that revealed card, or rather the tile that is depicted on that revealed card, onto each person's personal player board. The unique feature is that at different player counts, some players will be dealt a card face down that only they see, or they may share a card with someone sitting next to them, and so they are able to know what type of tile piece is going to be eventually put down onto their board. There are other cards in the middle that automatically start face up, and so everyone gets to know what those cards are, and those are generally played first, but then you go around the table revealing those face down or shared cards that only 1 or 2 people may actually know about. So there is imperfect information, and that creates a situation where you will be able to strategize where you want to place some of the forecasted tiles that are available to everyone, but also your personal card that you know of is more perfect information for you, and you can plan around that card while everyone else has to tactically maneuver around that revelation. In addition to this, there is intermediate scoring, and at the end of each round, you score the area, or the width times the height, of the largest rectangle in your personal board. This promotes a tactical placement of these tiles once again, and prevents you from placing tiles in the perfect spots, due to the fact that everyone has the same number and types of tiles, and so theoretically you can place these onto your board in a perfect arrangement to cover it completely. There are some bonus points if you do so by the end of the game, but this is deterred by the fact that intermittently your base score is primarily based off of how big of a rectangle you can make and maintain throughout the game. So tiles don't have to be placed adjacent to previously placed ones, hence the idea that you could theoretically just place all of these tiles in a perfect spot. But because of the randomness of the shuffled cards and the revealing of these cards, as well as this intermittent scoring, I think this basically prevents you from doing that if you want to play well. The last highlight and mechanism that I want to talk about is how the endgame is scored, not only throughout the intermittent scoring, which provides the base score that you have at the end of the game, but there is a balance feature, and what I mean by that is that each tile that you place down onto your board is reversible, with one side featuring greenery and plants and the other side featuring brown or gray buildings. For each complete small square made by each type of tile, and it's important that I mention each small square because, once again, some of these Tangram pieces can fit diagonally and fill a triangle's worth of a small square, or in other words, half of that square. And so a lot of the game is trying to fit pieces together to not only fill out these small squares, but potentially fill them with the same type of tile, the same face of the tile, thus completing a full square of that color. And by the end of the game, you can do this throughout the game as well, but by the end of the game, you count up how many individual squares that you have of a certain type, whether it's the greenery or the buildings, and you sum them up, and if that sum for both types of tiles is perfectly balanced, if you have the same number of both of those by the end of the game, or if they're within 1, then you get 20 points at the end of the game. If they are within a couple more, 2 through 5 or so, then you get less points, like 10 points, and so on and so forth. And so not only are you having to tactically place these tiles on and worry about creating the largest triangle or rectangle that you can, and also fitting these tiles perfectly to make these squares possible for potential diagonal pieces only covering half of squares, you also need to be cognizant of what face and what direction of these tiles that you're placing, whether they are gray or green tiles, essentially. And so a lot of decisions are made in each turn, in each card flip, to where you place these tiles, thus creating the game and the tough decisions that you may have to take. Now, comparing this game to others, I've already mechanically compared this game to Kingdom Builder and My City, where the tiles that you place, or what have you, the cubes, I believe, in Kingdom Builder, are dictated by a flip of the card, in which everyone else gets to build onto their personal boards for that piece, or whatever is depicted on the card. This is, I think, more comparative to My City than the shared board of Kingdom Builder, where everyone is building onto it simultaneously. Another game that comes to mind is Tiny Towns. It feels very similar when you call out a resource or flip over a card in Tangram City and call out a resource in Tiny Towns, and everyone else has to put that onto their personal board. Not only is this mechanism very similar, but there's also a sense of strategy when, in a variant of Tiny Towns, you get to call out yourself the resource that everyone else has to put down. Thus, you may be able to choose a resource that not only benefits your situation, but may be detrimental to someone else, depending on how closely you are following that game, or their game. And in Tangram City, I guess this is kind of similar to the fact that you can share or have a personal card that only you know of that in that round, and while everyone else does not know, and so you can maneuver some of the other tiles around to fit the tile that you know you will be able to place and that everyone else will have to figure out how to place on their own boards. The closest Rosenberg game that is similar to Tangram City, in my opinion, is Second Chance, which is a roll and write game where players choose from 2 flipped over polyomino depicted cards, and you have to write that into your personal board. And there are other mechanisms in play, including, flipping over a third card as like your second chance to hopefully get a shape that fits into your board. But in a sense, both games are very similar, where each action is depicted by a flipped card that may or may not be known. So I guess I'm essentially saying that both Tangram City and Second Chance are both in the realm of a roll and write type of game. Looking at what other people have to say about Tangram City going into the peer review, a lot of people enjoy this game for how quick it is in solving a interesting puzzle with the new and unique Tangram style pieces. Whether it's at solo or at 5 players, this game plays essentially at the same rate because everyone will be able to place their tiles simultaneously when a card is flipped. In addition to the unique pieces that you get to play onto your board, the unique scoring mechanisms in the balance scoring at the end of the game, as well as the rectangle intermediate scoring, keeps this game feeling fresh and different every time. There are some concerns, though. The longevity of this game is a concern for some people, since you do get to play all of your tiles onto the board, but just in a different order, and thus decreasing the opportunity to see different tiles be played onto your board. The randomness is essentially in the order of which these tiles come out, rather than what is available. For some, this game, because of that, it's not variable enough to warrant unique or different approaches to each time you play. For myself, I've played this game a couple of times, and solo included, and I can say that the speed of the game, in my opinion, was shorter, of course, at a solo game, not having to stop and explain any rules along the way, but it did not add too much time when I was playing with other people. I think this game is easy to learn and to catch on as you start to play, and once you kind of understand the way that this game is scored, I think for the most part, many people, gamers and non-gamers alike, will be able to understand this game and be able to roll with it pretty quickly. The puzzle itself is unique, with the scoring mechanisms and the physical tiles that you get to play around with feeling fresh and unique in the repertoire of games that both Rosenberg and other designers have done in the past with polyomino tiles. I really liked the checks placed into the game to prevent a perfect puzzle from being put together each time, particularly with the intermediate scoring and the balance mechanism, offering additional complexity to the decisions made. However, I do have some concerns that mirror what people have said about the replayability and longevity of this game. Replayability is a major concern for me because it didn't take too long to get to the point where I'm only missing a tile or two at the end of the game on my tableau, or in other words, being able to play the game as perfectly as possible. I think the point ceiling isn't too far off from where I currently am with the strategies that I have tried to employ for this game, and from the comments of others who have played this game perhaps more times than I have, or just smarter than me, that pinnacle has been reached pretty quickly as well, and there's nowhere else to climb in this game, essentially, when you think about it in points. I think for most players it'll just take a few plays to reach that top echelon of plays, but this may be different for everyone. Some people are a lot more adept with a puzzle style of game such as this, like tile laying and perhaps coming from polyomino style games. If that is your forte, then this won't be too far off, and once you understand how this game scores, then creating that puzzle will, I think, potentially start to feel repetitive. And this is also supported by the fact that you get to play all of your tiles onto your board, or potentially play them all, but just in a different order, so there isn't any hidden tiles or a variable factor that would make every game feel a lot different, if that makes sense. Compared to other tile placement games like Applejack and Patchwork, there are some added mechanisms that not only offer replayability in those games, but mastery as well, and a higher skill level being able to be attained in those games, such as the fact that in both games, the resources that are used to buy tiles to place onto your tableau are also the endgame victory point counters as well, and so you are constantly trying to figure out how to balance the purchases that you make, as well as create a semi-engine to be able to get more points by the end of the game. And in both of those games, for example, in Patchwork, you do get to see all of the tiles. They are placed in a random order, but not all of the tiles will be able to be played by the end of the game. For the most part, sometimes it just happens to be that way based off of the order and which tiles are chosen. But in all of those games, you have multiple options available to you at a time to be able to choose from. In Applejack, I should mention that you won't be able to see all the tiles in that game as well, but you always have a choice of at least 2 tiles to choose from to put onto your board, and oftentimes there are more than 2 that you get to choose from, and so the choices that you have are widely available in that game. And in addition to being able to play those tiles anywhere possible onto your tableau, as it is in Tangram City, you only get to choose from 1 tile at a time, and so the choices and the decisions of what to be made are decreased in comparison to those other Rosenberg games because of what you're able to choose from. Another comparison and fact about both of these games, or these collection of games, is that in Applejack and Patchwork, the decisions that you make and the tiles that you take are very interactive when you are playing with other people. For example, the tiles that you take from Patchwork and Applejack will be taken from a shared market around the board, so that once you do take that, it will affect the decisions that your opponent will make, not only in the fact that they can't take that particular tile, that individual tile, and place it on their board, but also whatever is left over, and the position of the tracker in Patchwork in particular will affect what kind of choices the next player will have allowed to them. And so that isn't a factor in Tangram City as well, once again due to the roll and write nature of flipping over a card and everyone placing that tile onto their board and then moving on to the next one. There's no interaction whatsoever. The only difference is, I will say, is that each board in Tangram City, the personal boards that you have are double-sided, and they have a starting piece that is in a different spot. And so the puzzle may be slightly different based off of where you do start, in addition to the order of which tiles are revealed due to the cards that are flipped over. But it does feel a little bit different and more simplistic when compared to the decisions made in Applejack and Patchwork City. Overall, I really enjoyed Tangram City. I think the tiles and the rules make quite a unique feeling game. And in general, compared to Rosenberg games, it doesn't have the same element of mastery and staying power as some of his other titles that follow similar tile-laying rules such as Patchwork and Applejack. And I think that's okay. I think Tangram City is meant to be a little bit more of a lighter game, not in a sense of rules complexity. I think the rules are somewhat similar to Applejack and Patchwork. I think scoring-wise, Applejack is a little bit more complex and mathematical, but in a sense of how you play the game, it's very simple. All three of those games are very simple, but the way that you play those games can really vary, and the skill ceiling is a lot higher, I think, in Patchwork and Applejack compared to Tangram City. And so if you want to play a more casual game, I think with unique tiles and unique scoring mechanisms, then Tangram City might be interesting to you. So those are my thoughts on Tangram City, as well as some news regarding Rosenberg games. Thank you for making it this far into the video, and thank you for consulting with me today. Hope that you schedule an appointment with me real soon, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.